This passage is a review of a book. The book is where the author goes looking for her ancestors. It's about ancestry hunting. And the author critiques the book by telling us why did she do that? What were the reasons that she went trying to trace her ancestors and things like that. All right, let's look at the passage in detail before we look at the questions. Who am I? Is the question troubling Maud Newton in her extraordinary and wide-ranging book? Who am I is the question that is troubling Maud Newton in her extraordinary and wide-ranging book, Ancestor Trouble. So the very first line indicates that the author's critical review or critique of the book is going to be tilted towards the positive. He's calling it an extraordinary and wide-ranging book. Because ancestors are trouble, locating them, understanding our connections to them, reconciling facts about them with myths we've been told, and reckoning with the impact of those distortions and deceits, all of which Newton seeks to do. The second sentence tells us in a nutshell what the book is about. In this book, Newton tries to tell us she tries to locate her ancestors, understand her connections with them, understanding our connections with them, how to reconcile facts about them with myths. So they were ancestors. They're people who lived way many generations before you, your great-great-great-grandparents, right? So you know, through generations there's a tale. There are myths that are carried on. Now, when you are there, how do you find out which of these tales about them is a fact or a myth? So you need to find out. Locating them, understanding them, reconciling facts about them with myths we've been told, and reckoning with the impact of those distortions and deceits. If you've been told lies about them, distorted truths about them, distorted facts about them, how do you deal with that? All this is what she seeks to do in her book. The question is also complicated by a harmless but not insignificant deception by Newton. Now, these are the questions she seeks to answer, but she herself does one act of deception. It's harmless, but it's important. What is that? Her real given name is Rebecca, possibly after her grandmother or her great-great-grandmother, but who years ago started blogging about her family under the pseudonym Maud, borrowed from her great-great-grand-aunt Maud. Newton attributes the switch to irony, perversity, projection, and a desire to shield the innocent. Now, why did she change her name? The reason she gave is irony, perversity, projection, and a desire to shield the innocent. She didn't want to write in her real name. But it seems to this reader, that is the author who's writing this passage, that Rebecca became Maud also speaks to the preoccupation of this entire book. Now, this is the author's verdict. What is the main point? What is the preoccupation of the entire book? What is the book dealing with completely, entirely? The periphrastic construction of identity itself. Periphrastic means roundabout, something which is not straightforward. Suppose I say, you ask me, are you going to take the class tomorrow? I'll say, I will not take it today. I will not take it day after tomorrow. So I'm not telling you yes and no directly. That's a periphrastic way of speaking. Periphrastic construction of identity itself. That means the twisted construction, the roundabout, indirect, not very straightforward construction of identity itself. So the book is about identity, identity crisis, identity confusion. You can interpret it in any which way. At the root of a lot of art, wrote Nanette Vonnegut, Kurt's daughter, in a passage Newton quotes, is an injury that needs addressing. So Newton in her book has quoted Nanette Vonnegut. Okay. What did she quote? That at the root of a lot of art, at the bottom of a lot of art, there is an injury that needs addressing. When people create art, at the root of it, the basic reason for it to come about is an injury that needs to be addressed. So what is Newton's? The author is asking, so if this book is considered a piece of art, what was the injury that Newton had to address? That is the question the author of the passage asks. Then the answer to it. She begins where all lives begin, with parents. Newton walks, talks, and looks like a father, a man from whom she is now wholly estranged. Estranged means alienated. So Newton, the author of the book, looks like her father, talks like her father, walks like her father, but she's totally alienated from him, separated from him. She has no connection with him. Estranged in her childhood. Okay, estranged in her childhood. He peppered her with criticism. Peppering means liberally giving her doses of criticism. Spanked her for being constipated and grounded her for getting B. So he was a harsh father. He stressed the importance of the purity of blood and punished Newton for watching Sesame Street. Sesame Street is a famous cartoon with Muppets. It's actually a show. It's a TV show, animated TV show with Muppets. A very popular children's TV show. But the Newton's father punished her for watching Sesame Street because it featured black and white children playing together, and he had some funny ideas about purity of race. He blotted out the faces of black children in picture books. Newton's mother was a whirlwind of charisma, creativity, and passion. So she was a very talented woman, charismatic, creative, passionate, whose attention was like the sun, warm and life-giving. So you get the image of this harsh father and this a wonderful mother, wonderful person. We don't know if she was a wonderful mother because she seems to be charismatic, creative, passionate, and her attention was like the sun. It gave warmth, it gave life. But, now whenever you find but in any passage, be very careful, because what comes after it is a very important point the author wants to make. But it was her mother's inaction that cut deep. It was her mother's lack of action in her life. We will read what exact action that cut deep, that hurt her most. Her mother remained essentially mute. Newton writes that she was molested by her stepfather at age 12. Her mother remained essentially mute. What does it mean to resemble or be descended from a father who cavalierly silenced people, or a mother who stayed silent herself? So here you had a dominating father who silenced people, who was so dominating, and a mother who kept silent in the face of a big crime. And who were they descended from to behave this way? Now you look at what injury, what was that hurt or wound that made Maud Newton, or Rebecca Newton as her original name was, go ancestry hunting. Newton summons her ancestors up and out of old news, clippings, census data, genealogy websites, conversations, vital records, letter, and other archives. She finds every source to find out about her ancestors. She conjures, as it were, from a grave rubbing, the story of her notorious great-grandfather, Charlie Bruce, who supposedly killed a man with a hay hook in a bourbon-fueled rage. Bourbon is a drink. So her great-grandfather was allegedly, there was a story that he had killed a man when he was drunk, lost his mind from grief, and died in an asylum. This is what she had learnt about her grandfather. Come to find out, the story was only partially true. Then she came to find out that this story of her father killing somebody in a drunken rage and of losing his mind from grief and dying in an asylum, that this story was only partly true. Newton's research reveals that Bruce had been acting in self-defense. He didn't kill because he was angry. He killed to save himself. Apparently, after standing up for a girl who'd been victimized by her stepfather. Now, look here. He was not only trying to save himself, he was doing it in self-defense to protect a girl. So now you are looking at her great-grandfather from a totally different perspective. He was not a murderer. You're looking at him from a very positive point of view. He was trying to save a girl. And in that act of self-defense, somebody was killed. George Grimes. Grimes had assaulted her with the intent to rape, and Bruce seems to have testified against him. In an act of generosity towards Bruce and empathy for her 12-year-old son, Newton buys a headstone for his anonymous grave, and she inscribes, "Charles Bruce, not forgotten," shrinking the gap between fact and fiction, trauma and justice, self and others. So what did the author do? Author of the book, that is Maud Newton, do when she found out that her grandfather was actually a good man, not a cold-blooded murderer or a person who murdered when he was drunk? She found his grave and wrote on his gravestone, "Charles Bruce, not forgotten." And this act seemed to shrink the gap between fact and fiction. At least it brought the truth for her. Trauma and justice to some extent, and shrunk the gap between self and others. See how beautifully it is written. What will Newton do if she completes her quest, if she finds out everything about every ancestor of hers? The author is asking. What would anyone do if fully enlightened about who they are and how they came to be? These are the questions that the author of the passage poses to us. Could we invent ourselves anew? Can you make yourself somebody new if what we found out was ugly or unwanted? See, when you go trying to find out about your ancestors, there's no guarantee that your ancestors were wonderful people, right? So what if you find something disgraceful or bad about them? Would that change your identity? Would you do that? What would you do? How would you face ugly truths of the past? How does our DNA fit into all this? These are questions that the author is asking us. That is the summary of the passage. What is the central theme of the book Ancestor Trouble? You may answer this question without referring to the passage. Suppose your summary of the passage hasn't been very good. You can always quickly go back to what does Newton seek to do in her book. There are 4 lines about that. You can go back to that. We will go back to that. It's about inventing ourselves in new forms once we get to know our ancestry. Does this sum up her book? It's about ancestor hunting, which can be enriching but also troubling. Is this the answer? It is about the confusion about identity of individuals. What is the main point of the book in one sentence? We will try to frame it in one sentence. It's about inventing an identity that is mostly about projection to others. All of them are aspects of the book, or seem to be aspects of the book. So which one is the central theme? Let's just go back to the book, to the passage. She wrote an extraordinary and wide-ranging book, Ancestor Trouble. Ancestors are trouble. Locating them, understanding our connections to them. So, locating them, understanding our connections to them, reconciling facts about them with myths we've been told, and reckoning with the impact of those distortions and deceits, all of which Newton seeks to do. This is what she's trying to do. Who are they? What is their connection? What is the myths that is associated with them? What are the facts that is associated with them? Okay, this is what she seeks to do. In doing so, the author says she plays one trick on us, one deception on us, that her name is not actually Maud, it is Rebecca. Then the author says that Maud is a pseudonym that she borrowed from her great aunt or great-great aunt. Newton gave a reason for it, but the author says Rebecca becoming Maud also speaks to the preoccupation of this entire book. What is the main theme of the entire book? The periphrastic construction of identity itself. So the book, we can say, is about not tracing ancestors because you want to find out your identity. So it's a roundabout way to find out who are you. So it's a kind of related to your confusion or lack of clarity about your identity. So it is option C. It's about the confusion about the identity of individuals. Okay, and how do you derive it? From the example the author gives of her using a pseudonym and hiding her real name. And he says that is what the book is all about. The book is all about confusion of identities. So the answer is C.